Alright, Crazy Medusa family, I have a very special video for you guys today. And for those of you guys that are new to the channel, my name isn't Crazy Medusa, it's actually Saloni, and I have studied in Cornell University. I've also had the privilege of spending some time at Harvard. And over the last few years, in addition to making these YouTube videos for you guys, I have looked at tons of profiles, student profiles that have gotten into top elite colleges, Ivy Leagues, top 20 schools in the US, and some average profiles where the grades weren't the best, but they still got into some decent schools. So in this video, I actually want to break down the entire process of activities, showing you guys what the important activities are, and most importantly, how do you actually present them in the right way so that can differentiate you from an average student versus a good student. So before we get started, I do want to put a disclaimer out there that this list and these comparisons that I'm going to do isn't any sort of template that students should follow. Just because you have some great activities, they don't promise you a spot in the Ivy Leagues. And at the same time, if you don't have some, a great profile, that doesn't mean it's a sure shot rejection. So, use all of this information with a grain of salt. And this is hopefully to provide some amount of motivation and a helpful resource for you guys to point you towards the right direction, so that you can improve your chances of getting into your dream school. And just a spoiler alert, students don't need to cure cancer in order to make it to these top universities. We will be looking at a research experience, a volunteering experience, both of these that fall under an extracurricular activity list. And the third one is going to be an academic honor. Now, as you guys know, we are allowed to, add a mixture of activities into your profile. You can add 10 activities and 5 honors. So which is why I, chose these 3 examples. Now, just as a bird's eye overview, I do want to mention that the extracurricular activities that you have can fall, in one of these 8 categories. The first one is leadership, academic activity, volunteering, cultural, sport, community, environment, and passion. Now, it's needless to say that it's almost impossible to, say that each student should have each one of these 8 activities, because then all the students would basically have a very similar looking profile. The good or the resourceful thing to do here is to have maybe a spread of like 5 to 7 different activities, and that is to show what your passion and interests are. Now, for example, a student may not necessarily be interested in sports or cultural. So that's okay. The point over here is to show your personality traits, your character traits, and what you genuinely care about. For example, if you are a student that wants to pick a major of computer science, that doesn't mean that all 10 of your activities have to be computer science related. So you do want to have some amount of diversity within your application itself to show the admission committee that you are interested in something else other than your major, because that honestly sounds more genuine. Just because I want to study biomedical engineering doesn't mean that I think about biomedical engineering or medical devices 24 hours a day. There are other things that I care about, and that is what the admission committee wants to see in this section of your profile. So in my opinion, I think this is what helps students stand out. Honestly, having a research experience in your profile, something to do with volunteering, and lastly, an academic or leadership skill. Now, when it comes to the research experience, I feel like there are 2 avenues you can explore. The first thing is to do something that is in person. This is obviously beneficial because you're working in like a lab setting under a professor in a university. A lot of students choose to just contact a professor at their nearby university local to their home, so they can just travel to and from. If that's not possible, doing a virtual research experience is the next best thing. Now, the Research Bootcamp by Incognito Blueprints is the perfect place to get started, because honestly, it helps you build so much more than just academic credibility when you are involved in research. In addition to learning how to do research, academic research, write a paper, write a report, you also get to work in like a group dynamic setting, learn communication skills, task management, time management, and organization skills. All of these intangible details are something that colleges in the US definitely look out for. The next thing we have is volunteering. Now, again, I think these can be environmental or community based. And the one thing you need to kind of notice in this entire section is that you need to work on causes that you care about. Just because we are saying you need to have a volunteering skill on your profile doesn't mean that you list down 10 different activities that you've done related to volunteering in your society. Like basically you're doing everything. You're doing everything from donating blood to cleanup drives to making like your society a better place. It seems a little far-fetched, and that may give the admission officers an impression that the only reason you're doing these activities is for the sake of the application. So instead of picking so many, just try to focus on one or two that you really care about and are genuinely passionate about. And finally, this is something I see in a lot of good profiles, is some amount of academic achievement. So any sort of school, national or international recognition will do wonders for your profile. Now moving on to how the section actually looks. Now this is what the activities section of Common App looks like. If you go into the activities tab, you can see that they will ask you, do you wish to report any activities? You actually have to click yes to this, and that is when a bunch of drop-down menus appear, and you'll see something that looks like this. For each activity, you can choose a type. This is a simple drop-down menu. You have to write down your position, your organization name, a description, and just fill in some other details over here. Now these things on the right are something that is super easy, nothing to worry about. What's important are these three positions: position, organization, and your description. If you notice carefully, each one of these has a character limit: 50, 100, and 150. 150 characters isn't too much. If you think about it, it's barely 2 lines, so not even 1 sentence. So how you decide to draft your response for each activity matters in this part. And I've seen a lot of students, when they come into this section, they just kind of run with it, and as if they're filling out an application, just type it in one go. That is probably not the best technique to use when filling out the activity section. What you should be doing is making sure you work on this offline to include as much detail as you can in those 150, 150 character limits, to make the admission officer understand the depth of your activity. It showcases that you spent time in actually writing it. It also showcases the maximum amount of contributions you had in your activity itself. So both points are winners for you. So let's take an example here. If we take a look at the research-based activity, we see that on the right here, we have the average profile. The student would have written position as a research student, self-learned, and published a paper in a journal on analysis of machine learning models for lung cancer. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this. It's very direct. It's within the character limits, but I feel like it's a little bit of a lazy writing. There's nothing great about it either. On the other hand, if we were to change this into a great looking profile, I would do something like this. In the position, I would write principal author in a peer-reviewed journal, still 39 characters. Under organization, we would write incognito blueprint, since it was done maybe as part of the research bootcamp. And the work was published in this particular journal, and this was the title of the paper. Although you see that the organization has much more information than just the organization, it's still within the word limit. And if you think about it, this is a very smart move, because when it comes to the description, now you can include other details like the journal number, so that if the admission committee wants to look this up online, they just have to type in this journal number. In a lot of cases, if your research gets published, you get a unique DOI number, and anyone that searches that DOI number can find your published research online. It adds an extra level of verification and ethical nature to whatever you're writing. Then it gives you the chance to actually write about what you did in this research. So maybe the student tested the confusion matrix, natural language processes, epoch graphs for working prototype presented in the BMES, which is again another society, and collaborated in a team of 5. So as you can see, by putting maybe majority of the details in the first 2 sections, it allows the students to add a lot more information under the description. And like I said again, the first one that we see over here, which is the average profile, there's nothing wrong with that. But the elite profile, when you look at it and you read it against the average profile, it shines a lot more. And that is what this whole admission game is about. It's not that your profile is bad. It's just that how does it compare to a better student's profile? So you need to make sure that you're in that better student's profile and not the average one. So in the same way, let's look at an example for a volunteering or community-based activity. Now, again, if we look at the average profile, we have the position as maybe a teacher or a tutor in their local society, and this student may be taught underprivileged children math and English. Again, nothing wrong with that, But if we were to compare this against the elite profile, we can maybe see that the position was something more polished up, a young global scholar. And when I say polished up, I don't mean that made up. It's just that they might have taken the liberty to ask the society that they were a part of to give their position a specific name. So it seemed like there were certain responsibilities associated with it. The organization could be Teach for India and the Fellow. Again, that's what the society was under maybe. And in the description, the student maybe wrote selected from 4,000 plus students with a 20% acceptance rate. Again, notice that acceptance isn't spelled out entirely, and that is a good move too, because you don't have to, in 150 characters, it's fine to use these abbreviated forms. You can just write some short forms to fit in what you want to. Curated curriculums, campaigns, projects. Teacher in STEM English subjects for K-12 students. K-12 is a general notation for kindergarten to 12th grade, and instead of English, they just typed out ENG. So again, small things that you can do to kind of curate your response to fit that character limit. And details like the selection criteria, the acceptance rate, a lot of these things can mostly be found online if you try to look for organizations that you're involved in. So again, these are good ways to show that you were selected from a big crowd and there was like, a stringent level of rejection to a position that you applied for. So that again helps the admission officer understand that there was some amount of competition and you were selected among students, not just applied for a specific position. Now let's take a look at the honors section of Common App. So we have the honors that falls under the honors category. And again, it asks you, do you want to select any honors? When you click on yes, there's an entire drop-down menu which pops up and you are allowed to put up to 5 different honors. All 5 of these honors are optional, which means that you can choose to add 0. But again, the more that you add, the better, your profile looks. So for each honors, there's a title and that's pretty much about it. A grade level and level of recognition. Now, the title doesn't really have a character limit, but I kind of maxed out the character limit and apparently it only lets you go up till 100 characters. So again, not even 2 sentences, maybe 1 line is what is allowed. If you think about it, these are what your honors should look like. So just taking a look at elite profiles, no average here. Maybe there was a student that had the Indian National Math Olympiad semi-finalist. This is just 51 characters. A national recognition for class 12. We have another student maybe in the National Scholastic Art and Writing Scholar who won a $25,000 scholarship and a medal ceremony in New York City, 98 characters and international level. Now with these positions of 1 and 2, you can also see that the first one is just 51 characters, whereas the second one is 98. So it's not necessary that you fill in all of these character limits. If you're able to explain your honor in less number of characters, that's okay. It just needs to be direct and just ethical. The higher the level of recognition is, obviously, if it is something that's international, that carries more weightage in your profile. So try to scope these out. If you're maybe someone who's in grade 9, 10, 11, try to participate in these opportunities. A lot of these international competitions are virtual nowadays, so students from any country are more than welcome to participate without traveling to that particular country. So try to get involved in these activities as well. Lastly, we have the YYGS Scholar, is the Yale Young Global Scholar. Again, there is a selection-based criteria, but it is an international recognition. That's all that I had for this video. I hope that the elite profiles that I spoke about didn't demotivate a lot of you guys. Just remember that even if you feel like you aren't up to that level yet, there is always a time for improvement. Whether you are going for an undergraduate degree, you have your entire degree to then work towards maybe for a master's or a PhD degree. And again, this is just to show you some inspiration and get some data out there, because I feel like these topics aren't talked about too much, and how you write and communicate what you've done really matter when it comes to top 20 schools, Ivy Leagues, and they do really care about these. I also want to point out that the research bootcamp from Incognito Blueprints cohort number 3 is live right now. There was some great response in cohort 1 and 2. Students worked on some really impactful social-based projects. This was entirely virtual, so students from anywhere in the world could participate as long as you basically had like an internet connection. The research that students did in cohort 1 and 2, they are submitting it for like peer-reviewed journals in like Stanford, Cornell, and different places. So they're really taking it out there and all of these projects were unique to the groups that actually worked on them. So if you guys are interested, you can definitely sign up. I think the early bird pricing is still going on for cohort number 3. I'm going to leave a link in the description below. Like the video if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.